Welcome to my series on prayer and Elijah, and today we get to think about the picture of Elijah. The Lord replied. Elijah's presented his gripe to God, and God's reply is, "Go out and stand on the mountain. I want you to see me when I pass by." All at once, a strong wind shook the mountain and shattered the rocks, but the Lord was not in the wind. Next, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. Then there was a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. Finally, there was a whisper of a gentle breeze. When Elijah heard it, he covered his face with his cloak. And it's typical. Elijah presents his gripe, and really you want God to say, "Oh yes, let's work through that and I'll answer some questions." But he doesn't. He just says, "Go and stand on the mountain." Now Elijah's in his cave. He spent the night in the cave. And the details are scant, really. So I think that draws us in to say, okay, you're there on the mountain. What is your cave? Why are you in your cave? For me, the cave is about fear. I'm hiding away in the cave, and God is wanting to draw me out. God says, "Go and stand on the mountain." I want you to see me as I pass by. That's a reminiscent of Moses and Moses having a similar encounter on Mount Sinai. So it's going back to the roots of his faith. But I'm not sure either Elijah doesn't go and stand then because he's still in the cave. But still in the cave, at once something happens. A strong wind shook the mountain and shattered the rocks. And here are the rocks cracking with the strong wind, and you get the sense of the strong wind, the leaves being blown about by the strong wind, breaking the trees there, the tree stumps. A strong wind shook the mountain and shattered the rocks, but the Lord was not in the wind. Next, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. I suppose that's also the cracks here, big cracks going down, are about the earthquake. Then there was a fire. Where's the fire? Up here. Lightning perhaps setting off the fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. So what's going on there? In a sense, you have to answer that question. You have to say, what's going on for me in that? And I can only answer, for me, it feels like Elijah has experienced God working in dramatic ways, like on Mount Carmel. But Elijah is needing to learn that God also works in other ways. And I would go as far as to say God prefers to work in other ways. But what's going on for you? How is God wanting to take you on in your experience of him, take you on to new ways of encountering him? Finally, there was a whisper of a gentle breeze, sometimes translated a still small voice, as in that lovely hymn, "Dear Lord and Father of Mankind," the still small voice of calm. I think it's difficult to really translate the Hebrew there, but it's something quiet. When Elijah heard it, he covered his face with his cloak. And to me, here's Elijah covering his face with his cloak. And to me this feels a very humbling. He's encountered God in a new way, and it's humbling, and he expresses that humility by covering his face. And the artist, oh dear, what's it called? Siga Koda, oh yes. Siga Koda, amazing pictures. Then he expresses the whisper of gentle breeze, the still small voice, as a leaf in Elijah's hand. And I love that very intuitive expression of God's speaking. A leaf in his hand. And I'll do a prayer exercise where we take a leaf and just see what God is saying to us through the leaf. So I think it's about, I suppose, our expectations of how God is and how he speaks to us, how he communicates with us, and how he wants to take us on to new things, and accepting God as he is rather than we want him to be. Allowing God to speak to us in his way rather than the ways we demand. There's something very humbling about this. So maybe you could take some time just to be there with Elijah, perhaps in an Ignatian way, of imagining yourself either with Elijah on the mountain or being Elijah. Just see what happens for you. Allow God to take you in the way he wants, and to just imagine the story and meet God in your imagination of that story, and just see what happens. See what occurs for you. Take time just to still yourself and then call to mind. It doesn't matter, the details don't matter, but just enter into God, allow God to speak to you in your imagination. I'll say more about this in another session. And just see what happens for you on the mountain. Amen.